Dear students, welcome to UGC EPG Pathashala on Human Rights and Duties. My name is Professor Y.S.R. Murthy. I am the Executive Director for the Center for Human Rights Studies, OP Jindal Global University. In this paper on national mechanisms for protection and enforcement of human rights, we will take up the second part of the role of NGOs. As I mentioned earlier on, there are statutory or constitutional commissions like National Commission for Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribe, National Human Rights Commission, Women's Commission, Children's Commission, Minority Commission, etc. On the other hand, there is a civil society and which comprises of media, non-governmental organizations, and in the last module we saw the strategies adopted by NGOs, which include legal intervention, which include naming and shaming, alliance building, fundraising, and a variety of other strategies. Now, in this current module, we will take up certain case studies of international non-governmental organizations and see how they have advanced the protection and promotion of human rights. What are the learning outcomes of this module? At the end of this module, you should be in a position to understand the role and relevance of international non-governmental organizations in the task of protection and promotion of human rights. Some of the most effective and efficient practices of NGOs at the international level to satisfy their role as key stakeholders in the protection of human rights. As I explained earlier on, NGOs are basically associations created by private individuals to address issues that are often outside of the scope of government. They have become increasingly influential in world affairs. The world is becoming increasingly interconnected through the globalization of communications, through transportation, and the world economies are getting integrated. It is very hard to imagine the world politics without international non-governmental organizations today. They are as diverse as their activities and the academic debates on their role and impacts. Some experts praise international non-governmental organizations' global role, while others express skepticism. They cite several successes. For example, the international campaign to ban landmines, which had been formed in 1992, is basically a coalition of all like-minded NGOs, and it was formed to bring about the Ottawa Convention, was signed by 162 countries. NGOs likewise formed a global coalition and effectively lobbied and participated in the drafting of the Rome Statute, the international treaty which established the International Criminal Court. The negotiations were conducted by the government representatives, but they unofficially relied on information and advice from international non-governmental organizations. In the same year, widespread NGO protests forced Shell, a transnational oil corporation, to abandon its plans to dump the Brent Spar platform at sea. Instead, the corporate giant had to dismantle and dispose of the facility on shore. That was, among others, the result of years of headline grabbing campaign led by Greenpeace, international NGO. Now let us look at some of the best practices. Amnesty International. In 1961, British lawyer Preeton Benison was upset, outraged when two Portuguese students were jailed just for raising a toast to freedom. He wrote an article in the Observer newspaper and launched the Appeal for Amnesty campaign that provoked an incredible response. It was reprinted in newspapers across the world. His call to action sparked the idea that people everywhere can unite in solidarity for justice and freedom. Amnesty has grown from seeking the release of political prisoners to upholding the whole spectrum of human rights. The organization won the 1977 Nobel Peace Prize for its work. Amnesty International's purpose and its formal accountability is set out in its statute. Its vision is of a world in which every person enjoys all the human rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948 and other international human rights instruments. It is based in London with its headquarters and the International Secretariat. The organization maintains its research office in London. To publicize human rights abuses around the world, Amnesty International published in 2015 104 reports and briefings, of which 67 are publications of 10 pages or longer. The reports published by Amnesty International Secretariat in London are delivered to the national sections. There, country and theme specialists on Amnesty staff use them to collaborate with volunteer groups on various campaigns in seeking to inform a broad public. They also put pressure on policymakers to take notice and to act on behalf of human rights. Amnesty refused to accept government funds, instead relying solely on donations from small private donors and members. One central mission became the mobilization of public opinion and enactment of government policies when massive violations of human rights occurred anywhere around the globe. Darfur in Sudan became one of those cases. In 2013, for example, on the occasion of the 10th anniversary of mass killings in Darfur, Amnesty International issued a report to update the public. There are many cases where governments have revoked the guarantee of civil rights during a coup by declaring a state of alarm, as in Guatemala did in June 1983, or by imposing martial law, as was done by Poland in December 1981. Amnesty International tries to send missions to investigate such situations. For instance, the suspension of constitutional guarantees in Nicaragua on December 28, 1974 was investigated by Amnesty International, which urged restoration of these guarantees to reduce human rights violations. One of the Amnesty International's functions is to monitor countries impartially and publish thorough reports detailing abuses of human rights. The material for these reports is collected from newspapers, government bulletins, transcripts of radio broadcasts, letters from prisoners and their families, interviews with former prisoners, and missions sent to countries. These missions do research, observe trials, talk with government officials, and investigate reports of torture. The information obtained is carefully cross-checked before publication in order to ensure the integrity of these reports. As a result, the reports are highly respected and credible internationally. They are translated into at least 12 languages and are circulated to journalists, editors, diplomats, and other public figures. By exposing the violations performed by governments around the world, Amnesty International hopes to cause international pressure to end these abusive practices. Another role of Amnesty International involves action in individual cases. Adoption groups are the basic unit of this activity. A particular case is assigned by Amnesty International's International Secretariat to a community-based group of 10 to 25 people. These people write letters to the prisoner and his or her family, pressure the government to release or to stop torturing the prisoner, and even visit the prisoner if possible. Amnesty International's Urgent Action Network operates in a slightly different fashion. Every 2 to 4 weeks, Amnesty International members receive appeals for people who are in acute need. The situation occurs when a prisoner faces torture, needs immediate medical assistance, has disappeared or is held incommunicado, or plans to go on a hunger strike. Amnesty International members all over the world write carefully worded postcards, letters and telegrams to government officials and prison directors. The thousands of communications are an attempt to put pressure on the offending government to release the prisoner or at least ameliorate the conditions of his imprisonment. One of Amnesty International's most obviously successful endeavors involves Julio da Pena Valde, a labor leader in the Dominican Republic. Valde tells of how he was treated better with each batch of letters that arrived until he was finally released. Amnesty International Ireland's Rights Sparks program is offering free human rights education workshops for primary school teachers. The workshops introduce teachers to a range of human rights education and development, which can be integrated across the curriculum and encourage the development of skills, including literacy and working with others. Amnesty International has successfully made a substantial difference when it comes to human rights violations. Now, let us take US based case study of Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch is a non-profit, non-governmental human rights organization made up of roughly 400 staff members around the globe. Its staff consists of human rights professionals, including country experts, lawyers, journalists and academics of diverse backgrounds and nationalities. Established in the year 1978, Human Rights Watch is known for its accurate fact-finding, impartial reporting, effective use of media and targeted advocacy, often in partnership with local human rights groups. Each year, Human Rights Watch publishes more than 100 reports and briefings on human rights conditions in some 90 countries of the world, generating extensive coverage in local and international media. With the leverage this kind of coverage brings, Human Rights Watch meets with governments, the United Nations, regional groups like the African Union and the European Union, meets with financial institutions and corporations to press for changes in policy and practice that promote human rights and justice around the world. Human Rights Watch conducts regular, systematic investigations of human rights abuses around the world. The researchers work to an established, proven and consistent methodology based on information gathering from a broad range of sources and with field-based research at its core. Human Rights Watch researchers conduct interviews when investigating reported human rights abuses in order to understand accurately what occurred. Interviews are not the only form of evidence that Human Rights Watch uses during research and reporting. Human Rights Watch conducts extensive reviews of media reports, domestic legislation, international law, policy papers, academic reports, and civil society reports during the initial stages of and throughout the research process. Trial materials, government reports, conviction and sentencing materials are all often used to make cases in Human Rights Watch reporting. Data collected from sources such as the United Nations, regional intergovernmental bodies, and domestic government agencies are also analyzed to prove the existence and extent of human rights abuses. Examples of this include using US criminal sentencing data to prove racial discrepancies in the sentencing of juveniles to life without parole, or using patient payment records from hospitals in Burundi to prove inequitable and unethical treatment of patients. There have also been instances where Human Rights Watch researchers have collected and analyzed primary data, such as in a report enumerating war crimes in Kosovo that contains Human Rights Watch's own analysis of trends in the data. Recently, Human Rights Watch has begun to use satellite technology to expose rights abuses in closed regions. Satellite imagery is extremely effective for showing the before and after effects of major conflict, such as the destruction of villages or mass movements of people, such as the displacement of refugees. These time-stamped images give clear evidence of the before and after effects of an attack. Human Rights Watch administer the Hellman Hamid Grant Program for writers all around the world who have been victims of political persecution and are in financial need. The grants are financed by the estate of the playwright Lillian Hellman in funds set up in her name and that of her longtime companion, the novelist Dashiell Hammett. Since the program began in 1990, more than 600 writers have received grants, including several group grants to writers in Bosnia, Burma, Peru, and Sierra Leone. Even so, the recipients are a tiny portion of the many writers around the world whose books have been banned or who have been exiled, imprisoned, tortured, and harassed because of their work. Each year, Human Rights Watch presents the Human Rights Defenders Award to activists around the world who demonstrate leadership and courage in defending human rights. The award winners work closely with Human Rights Watch in investigating and exposing human rights abuses. Human Rights Watch established Child Soldiers International, formerly known as Coalition to Stop the Use of Child Soldiers, in 1998, along with a group of leading human rights organizations, including Amnesty International and Save the Children. Human Rights Watch is also a founding member of IFEX, formerly known as International Freedom of Expression Exchange, that monitors censorship worldwide. Now let us look at another case study of International Federation for Human Rights, or called FIDH. It's an international human rights NGO federating 184 organizations from 112 countries. Since 1922, FIDH has been defending all civil, political, economic, social and cultural rights as set out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It strongly believes that local actors are most capable of dealing with human rights concerns. As a result, FIDH works to reinforce the capacities and influence in their own region. Its primary beneficiaries are national human rights organizations who are members of FIDH, and through them the victims of human rights violations. FIDH also cooperates with other local partner organizations and actors of change. FIDH, using a wide range of methods that have proven successful, like that includes urgent responses, both public and confidential, investigative missions, judicial observations and legal defense, political dialogue, advocacy, legal action, public awareness campaigns. The organization relies on a network of international volunteer mission delegates and facilitates exchange among human rights defenders around the world in order to reinforce their expertise. FIDH constantly evaluates its activities in view of becoming more efficient and regularly adjusts its short, medium and long-term objectives as necessary. FIDH is one of the only international human rights organizations with a broad mandate to accompany the victims of international crimes like genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, torture and enforced disappearances in their legal proceedings. FIDH's involvement in these proceedings in a leading or support role varies according to the case. Over the past decade, FIDH has acquired considerable experience in challenging accountability and engaging in strategic litigation, thus meeting one of its main priorities of fighting against impunity. Through the unique dynamic interaction with its 184 member organizations in more than 110 countries, which are often the first interlocutors of victims in situations of grave human rights violations, and FIDH Litigation Action Group, which is a network of lawyers, magistrates and academics working pro bono and acting as legal representatives of victims of international crimes. FIDH has been able to successfully engage in a series of legal proceedings challenging individual criminal responsibility, but also the responsibility of states and of multinational corporations, with a special focus on the access to justice of victims of sexual crimes. In cases of lack of remedies at the national level, alternative means of redress for victims of these violations may be found outside the country. Judicial proceedings may be opened on the basis of extraterritorial jurisdiction. These proceedings face specific challenges, but the experience also reveals that they have a real impact in the country of perpetration of the crime. FIDH is also involved in judicial proceedings before international tribunals such as the International Criminal Court or internationalized tribunals, also called mixed or hybrid tribunals, such as the Extraordinary Chamber of Courts in Cambodia, which FIDH has been monitoring quite extensively. FIDH is involved as amicus or third party in a number of cases before the European Court of Human Rights, and is increasingly involved in bringing cases before the African and Inter-American human rights courts and commissions. Now let us look at a case study of Forum Asia. Forum Asia is a network of 58 members in 19 countries as of January 2016 across Asia. It was founded in 1991 in Manila, the Philippines. Forum Asia is committed to building a peaceful, just, equitable and ecologically sustainable community of peoples and societies in Asia, where all human rights of all individuals, groups and peoples, in particular the poor, marginalized and discriminated, are fully respected and realized in accordance with internationally accepted human rights norms and standards. It does so by bringing together activists and stakeholders to tackle human rights issues. It tries to protect human rights defenders in Asia who find themselves in emergency situations. It advocates for human rights at the national, regional and international level, and it tries to build the capacity of its members and partners. Now let us turn our attention to Forum Asia's advocacy work on NHRIs. It's conducted by the NHRI's advocacy program. The program's main objective is to ensure that national human rights institutions are able to function in an enabling environment that is conducive for the actualization of their mandate and to advocate for the establishment of NHRIs in countries where such institutions do not exist, yet that are in full compliance with the Paris Principles. Its Human Rights Defenders program seeks to facilitate the creation of an enabling work environment for human rights defenders, including women human rights defenders, by reducing both actual and perceived threats stemming from the work and activities of human rights defenders and women human rights defenders. Forum Asia's UN advocacy program aims to increase the impact and effectiveness of advocacy actions by Asian NGOs and defenders in the use of UN human rights mechanisms in order to make Asian states more accountable to their human rights commitments, to their human rights obligations. In conclusion, Amnesty International is one of the most influential international non-governmental organizations. Its objective is to conduct research and generate action to prevent and end grave abuses of human rights and to demand justice for those whose human rights have been violated. Human Rights Watch is a more focused in research and documentation. FIDH's role is to coordinate the activities of its members for effective and efficient resolution of human rights concerns at the local level. Forum Asia was established as a coalition for not only helping out regional and local NGOs, but also national human rights institutions that seek its help. These organizations perform their roles in political, economic and social environments that are not the most conducive to realization of human rights, but they have each sustained by providing results of curbing human rights violations that could have been Herculean task in their absence. Thank you.